Hi folks, this is Coloring Chemist. My name is Connie and welcome back to my channel. Just a short video here. I was originally going to turn this into a segment for an odds and ends video, but I think it's important enough for me to make a separate little video. So yeah, here we go with creating a blender pen from Holbein Melts and an empty Copic.
I figured out something that I think is pretty neat. When I'm activating water activated media, like, watercolor pencils, Inktense, Neocolor 2s, that sort of thing, sometimes I'll use a water brush, but oftentimes I'll use, or I want to use, a colorless blender. Just because, I don't know, I find it gives me a little bit more control. So depending on the circumstance, right? The water brush can be probably better for larger areas, particularly where you want kind of a fluid kind of watercolor effect. But if you're in tiny areas and you want a lot of control, then I find you know, here's a Tombow, this sort of thing. This can work really well. I know a lot of people use alcohol blenders. And I think I talked about that in a previous video where I was talking about, oh my goodness, I think it might have been water-based media. I can't honestly remember. If I can remember, I'll try and link the video below. But from the chemistry standpoint, the alcohol blender actually doesn't dissolve the binders and what have you in water-based media very well. Now, that can actually be a choice. If you use an alcohol blender, it's not going to move the pigment in those water media or those water-soluble media very much because it doesn't dissolve the blender or the binder, that effectively. So if you want a lot of control and you don't want that pigment moving a lot, then yeah, an alcohol blender is a good way to go. But water-based blenders are just they're going to dissolve the binders and what have you in that media better, and they're going to be able to allow you then to move the pigment a little bit more. So I mean, Tombow is probably your standard one. I really like the Ecoline blender. I wish, and this is this is sort of what led me to the rest, the point of this little segment. Ecoline makes a whole line of water-based markers. I mean, very similar to Tombow and those sorts of things. So it's water-soluble ink, but most of the Ecoline pens have refills because you can unscrew the top. You can refill most of their pens, and the nib that's in the Ecoline, can you see that? So there's a pointy end. There's a pointy end. You can flip this nib so it's double-ended. I cannot find anywhere where there's a refill for the Ecoline blender. There's colored refills for their inks, but I cannot find a refill for the blender. If anyone knows where there is one, let me know. Because my hunt has been for basically something that's more sustainable from, sort of a throwing it away kind of standpoint, recycling, that sort of thing. Because Tombows, I mean, they're one and done, right? You can try and refill a Tombow, but I have tried it. It just doesn't, I don't know, it just doesn't work very well. And the nibs in Tombows, they're fiber nibs, right? And so they start to fray after a while. You can't replace the nibs on these, so then, you're kind of done. This, at least you've got a double-ended nib, and if I could find the refill for the blender, this would have been really good. But I just kept thinking, even these, they've got a fiber nib, they start to get soft, they fray. I then had a thought. When I was doing that video, when I was comparing I think I was comparing colored pencils and blending solutions. But I threw in some water-based or water-soluble pencils. And I discovered that this is one of the blending solutions that I was trying. It's Holbein colored pencil blender, and it's called Melts. It's a liquid. This is actually the refill bottle. If you buy the pen, it looks like this. So the pen comes full of blender. It's got 2 nibs. It's got again, a fiber brush nib. And then like a kind of a larger bullet nib. And it's meant to blend colored pencils, like Holbein colored pencils. Not water-soluble pencils, but colored pencils. And it does. It works really well. But again, the nib here is a fiber nib. It's not reversible. I've looked. You can refill this. You just drip this onto the nib, or you can pull it out and then use a little dropper to refill this. So this is refillable, but the nib isn't replaceable. And, you know, again, it's fiber. It starts to fray. So I was on the hunt for something that I could use as a blender pen that was refillable, had a nib that wouldn't fray and wear out, and maybe even had replaceable nibs, because then you don't have to be throwing, you know, pen bodies away. And then I had a thought, because I had discovered, like I say, this is for colored pencils, but this says aqueous. This also works incredibly well for blending water-soluble pencils, Inktense, you know, any of those. So I was using this pen to blend both water-soluble and non-water-soluble pencils and media, but the nib was getting frayed. And then I had a brainwave. I have a couple empty Copics sitting around because I had been trying them with, I think I have another Copic, I don't know where it is, somewhere. I put Gamsol in it, and that works really well for blending colored pencils. I thought, I wonder what would happen if I put this in an empty one of these. It's a Copic sketch. The nib on these, of course, is not fiber. It's foam. So it's not going to fray. The nibs on these are also replaceable. You can buy a little pack of 3 nibs for, you know, to replace with your Copic markers, but I mean to replace here as well. Or you can replace the chisel end. So this is a nice big chisel. But I wasn't sure if, because I have tried this before too with, I think it was a watercolor medium, and it did not work, right? Because, I mean, it's, again, it goes back to, I think, what I was talking about in that video, that chemistry concept called polarity, and whether things are going to be absorbed by other things. And because these nibs are meant to work with an alcohol solution, you know, a pure water-based, if I filled a Copic sketch with water, it's not, the water isn't going to soak into that nib. It's not meant to do that. It would just kind of beat off the surface, and it just wouldn't work. But I thought, well, since this is sort of meant to use to blend colored pencils, it does say aqueous. Maybe there's something in here called a surfactant, and I think there is. In fact, I think I read that somewhere. Basically, a surfactant is like soap. It helps to make friends between things like oil and alcohol and that sort of thing, and water. So I thought, I'm going to try this in here. It works brilliantly. So I just labeled it and then put a piece of tape over it so I don't confuse it with something else. But I have been using it. I've been using the brush end. Now, it's stained. That's, you know, I scribble it off on a piece of paper. It's going to stay stained like that probably. But it doesn't come off when I use it. But I can refill this. If I do find that this nib, because it does get soft kind of after a while, but it doesn't fray out like a fiber nib would. And if I do want to replace it after a while, I do have a package of nib replacements. I think I also have a package of chisel replacements. I haven't even used this to do any blending yet. But yeah, I can just refill this, replace the nib when I want. It's brilliant. Sorry, that sounds really conceited. I don't mean it to sound that way. It just surprised me that this worked so well. I kind of didn't expect it to. Sorry. But yeah, you can get this Holbein Melts. I think I got mine from Jackson's Art in the UK. You can probably also get an empty Copic from there. I think you can also buy empty Copics in a lot of different places. And it wouldn't even have to be a sketch. I think you can buy empty Chow markers too, which might be a little bit cheaper. But yeah, for blending, for blending water soluble pencils and media, or blending non water soluble. If I remember correctly in that video, Holbein Melts works for quite a lot of colored pencils, but it doesn't work well for the harder ones. So it worked well, I think, for Prismacolor, Holbein, those sorts of things, but it didn't work especially well for like polychromos. So for polychromos, I use the Durant blender pen. So this is just a slightly different, whatever this is, solvent that's in here. But basically, between this and this, I'm set. I can blend anything. Anything. So I thought that was pretty neat and just wanted to share it in a little segment with you.
I thought that I would pop in the blending charts that I did in that previous video, and I think it was called Blender Pens something. Oh my. Okay. I'll link it down below. And I will also link a Google Drive file where I've uploaded pictures of these. So if you want to take a, zoom in, take a closer look. This is a picture of the completed chart that I did. So you can see across the top there, I've got different blending solutions listed. And then down the side, I've got different media listed. So we've got Faber-Castell Albrecht Dürer, the Lyra Rembrandt, the Supercolor, Museum Aquarelle down the side, etc. And then across the top, I've got the different blending media. And you can see I threw in the Holbein Melts. And it works wonderfully with all of these water-soluble media. It's fantastic. The Holbein Melts is third from the right, in case you were having trouble finding that column. You can see it even worked really well blending out the King Art gel sticks, which are fourth from the bottom. So if you look at that row, sorry, my apologies. The King Art gel sticks are fifth from the bottom, not fourth from the bottom. Everything was sort of struggling. This is on mixed media paper. So this is, and it's not labeled mixed media. It's like the accent opaque smooth cover. I think it's 65-pound cardstock. So it's kind of smooth, but not super smooth. But everything was having trouble sort of blending out the King Art gel sticks, except the Holbein Melts. And I think I was using the Holbein Melts when I was doing this video in, I think I was just using the pen. Like you can buy the Holbein Melts pen. But yeah, it just worked fantastic. Here I have a picture of the completed blending chart with the non-water soluble media, just in case anyone wanted to look at that as well. And I will include a link to a Google Drive file where I've uploaded the picture, so you can download it and then zoom in and all that sort of thing. The Holbein Melts pen, I think, is the second column down, like the second column over. It's got the media across the top there, and then the blending solutions across the top there, and then the media down the side. So I've got polychromos, Prismacolor, Holbein, all that going down the side. So this was, non-water soluble, which is kind of what the Melts is advertised as blending for, right? It says on the bottle, colored pencil blender. It doesn't say, water soluble media blender, but it works fantastically. Now you can see for the polychromos and also for, I think it was like the Faber-Castell Black Edition. So there's a few that the Holbein doesn't work as well for, but those few, the Derwent Blender pen, which is the first column there, works really well for. So that's why I say you've got yourself a Derwent Blender pen, and you've got yourself some Holbein Melts in either the original pen, or you could use a refillable Copic, and you're set. Now, I understand. A water brush would also work really well for blending the water-soluble media. But the Holbein Melts just works really well, and it works for, some of these colored pencils and what have you that the Derwent doesn't work for. So, anyway. I hope everyone is safe. I hope everyone is well. I hope everyone is enjoying their coloring. If you like what you're seeing, consider hitting that like button, subscribing, leaving me a comment, hitting the notification bell, or letting a friend know that you found a video or a channel that you like and they might like it too. Until next time, folks, take care. Bye-bye.